All right, Nick, let's talk about the USC Trojans. The Trojans have had a killer offseason, as we've talked about. Number one in the recruiting rankings. They've done a really, really great job. But when it comes to one aspect of this team, I think a big weakness they have through all of this, we can dial in, see the data, look at the numbers, saying not only are they number one in the recruitings, but they're fixing one of their biggest issues. And I think this is going to be really big for them going forward. We'll get into all of the data here in just a minute, but first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Trojans really keying in on a big weakness of this team, and that's the defensive side of the football as far as how they perform, what has been going on, and everything involved with defensive side of the football here lately. And I think this data that we have here shows they're really trying to change their focus on the defensive side of things and how they are approaching it. But before we can get to how they improved, let's look at where they fell and what kind of hole they dug themselves into, so to speak, on the defensive side of things. So that brings us up to our first chart here. And this is USC's defensive performance. And we can see their rank as a defense throughout all the teams in the college football world in the red bar charts. And the line, the yellow line, shows the number of defensive PFF defensive grade they had that year as well. So just showing another example of just what they were doing. So we see here 50th overall for the Trojans in 2022. Not bad, so to speak, an okay grade, but I think their overall defensive grade was decent. There's a lot of great defenses. There's a lot of teams in the college football realm. So having an 82.1 PFF defensive grade is not bad. But then you see the next 2 years, things get a little bit dicey. When you look at the red bar charts, the higher they go, the higher their ranking is, which means the worse that they are. So in 2023, a big jump from 50th to 82nd in the college football world. 82nd ranked defense, not good, folks. We have a 77 overall PFF grade here. That's not good. That is not where you want to be. I think, just showing this really not good stuff here as far as what they got going on. Then you look at 2024, 74th overall team defensive ranking. Not good stuff. Again, a 79.4 grade there. So this is a team, not a lot of great stuff going on in these last couple years when you look at defense. But if we look at the future and the trend of what this team has going on, I think they're in a very good spot going forward, which brings me to our next chart here showing USC's defensive future projections. So again, the red chart showing their defensive rank for that year, where they're ranked in college football as far as overall defense goes. And I'll remind you again, 50th in 2022, 2023, 82nd in 2024, 74th. But we look again, this yellow line shows the number of recruits that they got in the recruiting class that were defensive players. We see in 2022, 5 recruits. I think that says a lot about what happened in 2023. We see 2023, 8 recruits. Again, probably a little bit to do with what happened in 2024. Not a big focus on the defensive class. We see in 2024, 12 recruits here for the defense. A big jump. They're getting bigger in 2025 so far. 13 recruits for the Trojans. And then in 2026, 16 recruits already in the 2026 class are defensive recruits for this team. So again, I think there's a big focus on defense for these next couple of years. The Trojans were single digits, 5 players in that draft class that were, defensive recruits. Not really great. 8, not really great. When you're starting to get 12, 13, 16, that is a good amount of recruits. That's how you fill up your roster with depth, and that's how you get overall better as a defense. I think this trend just shows the Trojans have changed their strategy. We saw it this offseason in their hirings and what they're able to bring to the team the last couple of years. And I think the staff is already making a big difference. A lot more focus on defense, a lot more recruits brought into this team as defense. And I think as we see the numbers go up for the amount of players that they have as far as this class, we're going to see their rank drop more and more. They're going to get higher and higher as far as their defensive rank. And I think we're going to see a much better defense here for the Trojans. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Trojans fans, in the comment section below. Let us know, what are your thoughts defensively for this team, as far as there's a lot of guys brought in the last couple of years, maybe 2024, 2025. A lot of good, transfers came in, a lot of good recruits came in. Let us know, though, what are your thoughts? Who do you think makes the biggest impact on this defense? Is there one of these recruits in, the bigger recruiting classes, 12 guys in 2024, 13 guys in 2025, that you think is going to make a big impact? Let us know your thoughts on this defense and who's going to make the biggest impact for it in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on everything here for the Trojans?
So it's one of those things that almost looks obvious, right? You recruit more defensively, you're projected to get better. But let's give some credit where credit is due. I really like that graph that you highlighted. The fact that going from 2022 to 2023 to 2024, we saw a concerted effort for the USC Trojans to recruit more defensive players. That yellow plot that you brought up, I think, was very insightful. Number of defensive recruits. And lo and behold, their defensive ranking got better. But what's interesting, right, is the timing of it. So if you recruited more defensive players ahead of the 2023 season, right? That's a lot of freshmen. How many of those are stepping on the field day one and contributing and becoming quality players? A couple, maybe, but not the whole class. All that is showing is a clear organizational attitude shift, right? And I think that's what's important. I think that's what Lincoln Riley did with USC going back a few years now. Now, still a work in progress, still a long way to go. But we can see starting at that moment that Lincoln Riley said, okay, we got to fix this problem. It's going to be our focus as a program going forward. And we've seen ever since then USC much more hyper-focused on getting more and more defensive recruits. They brought in Bowden, made some new hirings in terms of the coaching staff, filling it out across the board, winning the West Coast more, getting a lot of more of these California kids, beating Oregon for some of these guys. Again, it's all about an organizational shift, steering away from trying to play grass basketball, the kind of spread offense, win games 55-50, like Lincoln Riley did at Oklahoma, and reorienting to a really well-balanced team, but almost a defensive-minded team, which I think is exactly what USC, ironically, because Lincoln Riley is their offensive-minded head coach, needs to be. If you look at when USC is great historically, and just look at the Pete Carroll era as a phenomenal example of this, people remember Palmer, Leinart, Bush, Lindale White, all those guys, of course, but they were stacked defensively. They were just as dominant on the defensive side of the football as they were on offense. It's just people looked at the highlights and the Heisman and said, oh, it's the offense. But the reality is their defense was great. You look at the Alabama Crimson Tide in their dynasty, right? They obviously had a lot of big name offensive players, a lot of Heisman trophies on offense. You look at Devontae Smith, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, all these big name offensive guys, a lot of great quarterbacks. But really, if anyone remembers the Tide and their run under Saban, it was just an unstoppable stampede of defensive stalwarts, of five-star guys coming at you in waves all day. And that's what made Alabama so tough is while they had great offensive playmakers, they had such an elite defense that they could win on that alone. And I think USC under Lincoln Riley, under Bowden, are starting to orient toward that design, saying, listen, if we load up on quality defensive players and just a really good defensive group across the board, we can win on defense alone. And then that's where Lincoln Riley, with his offensive mastermind, his relationship with the quarterbacks, quarterback development, can push this team into a national championship. Let's look at the Ohio State Buckeyes and, frankly, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the two teams that made the college football championship game last season. Both of those teams have a lot of offensive firepower. Both of those teams, however, were oriented towards defense and special teams in terms of their structure. They wanted to and often could win on their defense alone. If you look at the questions with Notre Dame and Ohio State heading into the playoffs, it was 100% on the offensive side, but the coaching staffs and quarterback play of those programs propelled them all the way to the national championship game. That's what Lincoln Riley under USC is orienting to. Riley is betting, I think correctly, that if he builds on talent alone a championship defense, he, Riley, and whoever he selects to be his quarterback can carry them through the playoff together with a great coach-quarterback combination. It's worked in the NFL a number of times. It worked in college football last year. That's where USC is orienting to right now, and the trend is showing that. They are hyper-emphasizing defensive recruits almost in a way not to punish the offense, but to put more on the shoulders of the quarterback and Lincoln Riley. I think that is the right approach. The big question, the big concern I had, Riley, coming from Oklahoma, was that he didn't care at all about defense. defense when he was in the Big 12. And for a while there, he didn't care much about defense for the USC Trojans. We know the offense struggled last year as well for USC. That was an aberration. I think we all agree on that, transitioning out of the Caleb Williams era. There was going to be some bumps and bruises. I think going forward, 2025 and beyond, this offense, quarterback position, Lincoln Riley, they're going to be fine. They're going to be enough to carry you in those big games with the mastermind of Lincoln Riley. And of course, whoever's going to be the quarterback position there, whoever's going to lead that charge into the future. They need defensive stalwarts, though, to put them in position to win those games and get to those moments. And they've been executing on getting those guys into the building. I think the trend is certainly USC's friend at this point. A lot of things can change. Of course, recruiting has become a volatile environment, but it's undeniable that the Trojans have done a great job under Lincoln Riley, reorienting their entire focus, reorienting their entire strategy. And look, let's give credit where credit is due. It's the entire leadership of this program doing an incredible job. This is really hard, guys. This is any sort of big company, any sort of big program, any sort of strategy, and you have to do a total pivot to where you are and where you naturally want to be to a completely new direction. It's not easy to do, and I think the Trojans here did an incredible job executing on the shift.
Yeah, Nate, and there's one thing you said that really stood out to me, and it's kind of the fact that with Lincoln Riley being the coach that he is, this is a team that is structured to get a lot of help on defense. That's probably how it should run, because being the offensive mind he is, he should be the guy, that should be the part of the team that can do more with less. That should be the team where you can take an underrated guy and make him play over his capabilities, get the most out of them. So I think that's the key here is they're finally shifting that mentality. Like, oh, offense, offense, offense. We need to really give ourselves the best chance, to be a great offense, load ourselves up with score 50 points a game. Well, turns out the other team can score 60 points a game because our defense isn't really doing a whole lot. So loading this team up, showing what they're capable of, and getting the defensive side of things back on track. I think we see the trend here through the next couple of years. And I think you brought up another great point. You can see the lag as far as 2022 being 5 guys recruited doesn't necessarily affect 2022. They were ranked higher than they were in 23 and 24. But that lack of getting guys on the defensive side of the ball in 2022 had a big effect on 2023. Again, another, I'd say, lack of guys in 2023 kept that deficiency in 2024. And now, as we go through the next few years, this sudden explosion of talent that they've recruited, in the 2024, 2025, and 2026 classes, getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year, I think is going to have a big impact on the defense going forward. So overall, really great job by the Trojans. I think this defense is on the right track. And I think from the data, from what we've seen this year, we should see a significant improvement in the defense.